Welcome to your Nursing Theories class. In this class, we will be examining multiple theories. As you may already know, there are numerous psychological theories. So what exactly is the purpose of a psychological theory? Theories serve a number of important purposes. They will provide a framework for understanding human behavior, thought, development. By having a broad base of understanding about how and whys of the human behavior, we can better understand ourselves and others. Theories can also inspire research. Researchers use theories to form hypotheses that can then be tested. As new discoveries are made, these discoveries are incorporated into the original theory, and new ideas and questions can be explored. So, theories are not static. They are dynamic and always changing. Some examples of some theories include the psychosocial analytical theory of Sigmund Freud, which suggests that unconscious urges and desires drive human behavior. We have behavior theories like Ivan Pavlov and Skinner, the classic and operant conditioning theories, which suggest that all human behavior can be explained by a learning process. We have cognitive development theories like John Piaget, the stages of cognitive development, which describes the intellectual growth of children from birth to childhood. We have social culture theories like Lev Vygotsky, whose theory suggests that much of learning is an interaction between the dynamic culture and the individual. Today, we're going to start with Albert Bandura and the social cognitive theory. We're going to start with the biographical and cultural background which influences the theory's ideas. Albert Bandura is a Canadian-American psychologist born in 1925 in the small town of Bandura, which had about 400 inhabitants. He was the youngest child and only son of 6 children. His parents had immigrated to Canada as adolescents, and they had worked hard to save sufficient money to buy their first homestead and become wheat farmers. So they placed a high value on hard work and community involvement. They had no formal education, but they also placed a high value on education attainment. His father had taught himself to read 3 languages and play the violin. And he was a very active member of his community, serving as a member of the school board. And even though they had a positive outlook, they had undergone various struggles. Bandura recalls that when they first got the farm, there was a drought in the area, and the father had to take the roof off to actually feed the cattle. He also recalls that during the Great Depression, they had to sell some of the land because his father could no longer afford it, to keep it. And in 1918, the family had lost a daughter to the flu pandemic, as well as a son to a hunting accident. And during these times, Bandura recalls that these tragic events took a toll on his father's fun-loving spirit, but he was still able to remain optimistic, which carried over into Bandura's views of life. They actually encouraged Bandura to seek out opportunities outside of the town of Bandura during summer vacations. Bandura recalls that one summer he went to Edmonton and worked with a furniture manufacturing at a manufacturing plant, acquiring carpentry skills, which later helped support him through college, where he engaged in part-time carpentry and woodwork during the afternoons. He recalls working at Whitehorse in the Yukon, where he actually worked amidst a collection of characters that had fled collectors or alimony probation officers. And this exposure exposed him to the subculture of drinking and gambling, which helped broaden his perspective and provided a broader view, a scope of view of life, which Bandura feels which triggered Bandura's self-driven desire to actually learn more about why some people exhibit some behaviors and others don't. Bandura attended a school that was led by 2 teachers and had very limited resources because the town Bandura was small. So his primary education was explorative and practical, which turned out to be an advantage. It helped Bandura rely on his inquisitiveness and to actually seek to understand the concepts further by exploring them. He was very independent and very self-motivated, as well as self-directed. Bandura received his BA from the University of British Columbia in 1949. He remembers that he actually attended his choice of career in psychology actually came by chance. He remembers that because he had to carpool with others, the engineering and medical and pre-med students, very early during the day, and he had to add an extra class in order not to waste 1 hour of school. So he happened to add a psychology class, which he later found he really loved. So he was a proponent of fortuitous events, that he had a very positive outlook, that if you make the right choice when these situations arise, they really influence your life in a positive way. He specialized in developmental and educational psychology, and much of his work centers around the social cognitive theory. He received his master's and doctorate at the University of Iowa around 1951 and 1952, where he was influenced by Robert Spears, as well as collaborated with Richard Walters. The University of Iowa was the epicenter of psychology at the time. A lot of research was being done there. This influenced his ideas and his self-directedness, inquisitiveness, that he actually further develops and turns into a positive outlook. And he actually joined the faculty of Stanford University in 1953. The social cognitive theory started as the social learning theory in the 1960s. Bandura builds on Pavlov's and Skinner's theories, but he adds some very important concepts. The first is that people learn from observing others. There's also both cognition and motivation are needed for learning to occur. Mediation of processes occur between the behavior and the response. And learning occurs even if there is no change in behavior. These ideas were mainly based off his famous 1961 and 1963 Bobo experiment. In this experiment, if some of you may recall, Bandura had some children observe the behavior of some adults and determine if the child was going to imitate it based on whether the person was actually punished or not punished. And that's where his social cognitive theory comes from. This video can be watched on YouTube. Models can be symbolic, which are like written or oral instructions, films, television, audiovisuals, or just instructions from your instructor. They can be direct, like life models, national heroes like Washington, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers. And they can be positive or negative. And so an aggressive behavior may still be learned if the individual is not punished. Modeling can affect behavior in 3 different ways. It can facilitate the behavior, where you see the model perform the behavior and it's reinforced, so you repeat the behavior. It can inhibit the behavior because you see someone being punished for the behavior, so it is not repeated. Or it disinhibits. You see, like I mentioned before, you see a violent, aggressive behavior and the individual is not punished. So now the child can go ahead and act on that same behavior because it reinforces that behavior since there was no punishment. The second idea that Bandura came up with was that mediational processes occur between the stimuli and the response. So both cognition and motivation are needed for learning to occur. Because humans are active information processors, there are 4 motivational processes that have to occur for learning to take place. The first one was attention. The individual needed to pay attention to the model's behavior. The individual needed to be able to retain this image of this behavior that he had observed so that he could actually reproduce it later if he needed to. The observer also had to be able to reproduce these behaviors. They had to have the mental capacity and physical capacity to actually carry out this behavior. And they also needed to have the motivation to actually do the behavior. There had to be a reason for the behavior to be reproduced, something that could be, there could be some perceived value for the child to actually imitate the behavior that had been observed. That's why in some cases there was not enough intrinsic value for the child to reproduce that behavior. As you recall, theories are dynamic, so they're constantly changing. The social learning theory became the social cognitive theory as new concepts were added. It was no longer just about observational learning, where the individual learns through observation, imitating, and modeling. It was not just about behavior capacity, where the individual has to have the essential skills and knowledge to perform a behavior. New concepts like the reciprocal determinism and self-efficacy became a part of this new theory. Reciprocal determinism is the idea that there's a dynamic and reciprocal interaction between the person, environment, and behavior. In it, the personal factors include the biology, genetics, the personality characteristics. Cognitive processes include the processes that I explained before, like attention, remembering, And self-regulation skills. The environment consists of stimuli from both the social and the physical environment, as well as other reinforcement contingencies. And the behavior is influenced by these factors, the personal and environmental factors that determine whether the individual feels like they have the ability to carry out this behavior, and how complex this behavior will be, if how long it will last, and whether it will change or intensify. Self-efficacy is the belief in one's ability to influence events that affects one's life and to control the way that we experience these events. Bandura believed that there were four primary sources of self-efficacy. They included performance attainments, whether you had succeeded or failed in the past; vicarious experiences, whether you observed a person and you could identify with that person and felt that you were able to perform the activities that they were able to perform; verbal persuasion was somebody cheering you on; and physiological factors, how you interpret your somatic and emotional states, whether the increased stress, how you dealt with increased stress, sweaty palms, or if you remained calm during these stressful reactions. Out of these, and the self-efficacy influenced four functioning processes, which are listed on the right. It influenced the activity selection, how difficult or easy the tasks you chose; the goals that you set for yourself, if you were optimistic or a pessimist, it would determine the type of goals that you set for yourself; and the motivation, the effort and persistence that you put into succeeding, and the learning and achievements that you actually, the emotional intelligence that you actually gained. Were you resilient? And the higher the efficacy, the more likely you were to succeed or to pick more difficult tasks, more challenging goals, or have increased effort and persistence, and as well as higher emotional intelligence. The social cognitive theory still helps to explain behavior. You see it modeling in both Big Daddy and Mrs. Doubtfire. You see the little girl repeat the words that her father said to his mother in Mrs. Doubtfire. You watch the son in Big Daddy replicate the father's behavior by tossing a stick in front of the cyclist so that he falls just like his father did. The social cognitive theory is still useful in describing personality behavior. You have a child here replicating the dancing behaviors that he observes and enjoying it. It can also be used to develop treatment plans in anxiety, like the snake phobias that Bandura conducted, PTSD, as well as to form a treatment plan for encouraging health promotion behaviors. The social cognitive theory has also generated new research, like Gerbner's mean world syndrome theory, also called the cultivation theory, which suggests that TV violence shapes the viewer's reality. The theory of planned behavior, which suggests that attitudes towards behavior, subjective norms, and perceived behavior control or shape an individual's behavior and intentions. And the Intersections Show, which is an educational show to promote HIV prevention and behaviors in South America. So theories are constantly evolving and generating new ideas that can be explored. Okay, that is it for today. See you in the next class.